So I did the test and
You hear it?
We're going to let these folks in, and we will get started officially in just a couple of minutes.
Did the upgrade yesterday or the day before to Apple Watches. I can't find do not disturb on. Okay, I'm glad I could still find mine today. I can find it on my phone, so I guess that took care of it. It should. If you see the little moon at the top of your watch blinking, that's how it looks on mine anyway. Yeah. Moon's there. Hello, how are you?
Good morning, welcome. Here comes the rest of the folks. Told you 11:58, 11:59. Yep. We start getting more folks jumping in. And my apologies to the room. If we had a second computer, you would not be seeing all these different pop-ups, but I'm running solo today, so that's okay. I won't make this won't be staying on the screen, but occasionally we'll get a pop-up message here or there that someone wants to be admitted, and of course we want them to come in. And I'm sorry, it's not a microphone for enhancing the room. It's one for the benefit.
Okay, I'll try to speak loudly.
And you're welcome to shift over if you would like to, if that's going to be helpful.
well, as long as I can see her face, you know.
Understood.
That's part of it. With her face, I can know before I wore a hearing aid that I read lips for years.
You just didn't realize it. You just didn't realize you were reading that.
Well, if it's helpful at any point to move over, swivel your chair, and you just do whatever is best for you. We're not formal, so if that becomes an option you want to take advantage of, great.
I think I'm at the point of having to do something like pay again. I mean, I've had this one for years, so
you might need it upgraded.
Yes.
Well, we're going to do an official welcome to those of you who are here in person, here in our conference room at the Hope and Healing Center and Institute. And for those of you who are joining us online, and also a welcome to those of you who may not have been able to join us live, but who are listening to this recording. And hopefully you've received with this recording Reverend Neilson's slide deck, which we're going to go through this afternoon as well. My name is Seth Stander, and I know that we have the slide deck page up, but I'm going to just wave my hand for the benefit of those of you who may be seeing the little box. I'm the bald, large man who is running the computer equipment, and I also happen to be the community aging specialist for HHCI Cares. That is the part of the Hope and Healing Institute, which is run by Dr. Peggy Dettermeyer, who will be running a few minutes late, but be joining us after she presents at one of our quarterly board meetings, which is starting right now, if memory serves. And ultimately, the acronym CARES describes in many parts what we do as part of the Hope and Healing Center and Institute. We focus on caregiving, aging, resilience, ethics, and spirituality. Now, the beautiful part about all of this is that you only have to, for those of you who are taking notes, you only have to go ahead and to write down one thing if you'd like to know more about us, which is hhci.org, which is our website. It used to be all spelled out, but we've decided to make it a little bit easier for everybody by shortening the name to the acronym for the Hope and Healing Center and Institute. So if you go to hhci.org, you are welcome to explore any of the tabs that are there, and that includes such things as the About Us tab, which will give you information about all the different divisions: clinical, Gateway to Hope, our Houston Hope Line, and of course, HHCI Cares. It'll explain in greater detail our mission to go ahead and to expand mental health service and education across the greater community. And there's also in there 2 tabs that I would definitely advise for you, which would be the resources tab for past recordings of any of our presentations, a wonderful library of materials there. And beyond that, our events tab, which no doubt some of you have already found and used in order to register for today's program. But if you're just popping over, that's wonderful. And if you'd like to see what else we're offering, the events tab is pretty well populated on our events through the remainder of the fall. And of course, will be populated for our various winter and spring events as well. So today is the first of our new season of Lunch and Learns that CARES puts on from September through June. And we are very pleased to have Reverend Lisa Neilson, the Vicar for Pastoral Care for St. Martin's Episcopal Church, as our first speaker for this new year. We are delighted to have you here to be talking about a rather serious subject, but one in which all of us can find shades of life stories as well as wisdom that I'm sure Reverend Neilson will impart, making plans for one of life's certainties. A brief background for those of you unfamiliar with Reverend Neilson. She, as I mentioned, has served here as the Vicar for Pastoral Care on St. Martin's Episcopal Church campus, and for 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. Now, she is primarily responsible for managing pastoral care ministries, including care for those in the hospitals, for those experience grief, loss, or other pastoral needs, as well as planning funerals. Before arriving at St. Martin's, Reverend Neilson served in College Station as campus missioner for Texas A&M University, one of my daughter's top college choices. She is a senior in high school this year, and Blinn College. Now, her education includes a bachelor's in political science from Syracuse University, my hometown, by the way. So go Orange. Where she happened to enroll in, and this, of course, had a major career impact in ROTC, the Reserve Officers Training Corps. I say that because after graduation, she was commissioned as a U.S. Army officer and served on active duty for 9 years, and we thank you for your service. After serving as an Army logistics officer, she worked in management for BSNF Railway in Chicago and Fort Worth, heard the call, and I shouldn't say received, you did not have that given to you, you earned that master's degree in divinity from Virginia Theological Seminary in 2016. I am going to pass the microphone we refer to as the snowball over to the good Reverend and take it away.
Seth, thank you so much for that introduction. And one of the other things I do on the planning funeral side is I meet with people to pre-plan for funerals, people who are members of St. Martin's. And so you can keep that in mind. It just, I can give you material, you can make an appointment to sit down with me, or you can fill out the material and just bring it to me. If you don't feel like you need to sit down and talk about it. And since I've been at St. Martin's, along with our funeral coordinator, she helps me in planning funerals. I've planned about 250 funerals. So I kind of speak from some experience. In my own family personally, I've planned 3 funerals, and 2 of those I either officiated or I celebrated as well. So these are things today when I'm speaking. Obviously, I'm speaking from a perspective as a Christian, as an Episcopalian, specifically with experience at St. Martin's. But I think the things that we talk about have broad application. I think they can be useful or helpful for anyone of any faith background thinking about end of life matters. So we begin this program year at the end. with the talking about the end of life. So let's go to the second slide. Keep these up in front of me. So this is a quote. And I'm just gonna read it out. This is a quote from a professor of sociology. She's saying that as a sociologist who has studied end-of-life issues for more than 2 decades, I've learned that people know they should talk about death honestly and openly, but surprisingly few do. In fact, one recent study showed that while 90% of adults say that talking to their loved ones about their end-of-life wishes is important, only 27% have actually had these conversations. And I think this probably doesn't change too much over time. We all know these are things we should talk about, but it's uncomfortable. So we can go to the next slide. Why should we plan for death? The name of this is one of life's certainties. So there are very few things in our lives that are certain. Whatever your religious belief, whatever your faith practice, cultural practices, earthly life is finite, and every single person will end this life with death. It's a certainty. But it's uncomfortable to talk about, because even though it's one of life's most certain things, there's so much that we don't know that is uncertain about death. And each one of us has our own beliefs in our own faith about what happens after death, but it is uncertain. And because death is certain, we should prepare for it. We should prepare for it spiritually, mentally, financially, emotionally. We can go to the next slide. So here are some suggestions for planning ahead. So one of the things that everyone should think about is a will. You should have a will, and how that will is done is up to you. There are online resources. Talk to your legal advisor. But that is something that's very important. Have it done, make sure your family knows it's done, and make sure they know where it's filed so that it won't be a search when you do pass away. Add a trusted person to your bank account or any other important financial accounts. With one of the suggestions I've been given is with rights of survivorship, so that transfers, but that's something you should talk about with your own financial advisor or your own banker to make sure that the financial side of your life is covered. And let your loved ones know where your important documents are. And then make a list of those documents, make a copy, keep the original in a safe place. Don't put them in a safe deposit box, because sometimes those get frozen with death, depending on how those accounts are set up. But in those documents, you want that will that you've prepared, insurance documents, deeds, tax records, bank and investment account information, birth certificates, any of your important life documents. Just make sure you've got a list and your family knows where to find those. Think about your wishes regarding organ donation, and talk to your loved ones about those wishes, and so that they know what those wishes are when they're in that end of life situation. Make a list of people to notify. Your loved ones will have who your financial advisor is, your attorney, family, friends, colleagues, and on that list of people you would like notified, include their contact information. A phone number and an email address are perfect. Snail mail addresses tend to change more than, people will keep the same email, people will keep the same phone number. write your own obituary. And that's a really hard thing. I don't know if any of you have experienced this when a loved one passes away and you're trying to write the obituary, and what was important to that person, what should be mentioned. Write your own obituary and then just have it saved, and then they'll know what's important to you. Pre-plan your funeral and your burial or interment. Pre-plan it with your faith community, with your church or synagogue or mosque, and with a funeral home or a cremation facility. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's go to slide number 5 then. Pre-planning your funeral and burial. So there's 2 different ways. You need to pre-plan with your faith community, and you need to pre-plan with a funeral or direct cremation. So when you're pre-planning your memorial service or your funeral with your faith community, make an appointment to go visit your spiritual leader. The person who does that at St. Martin's is me. So of course you can talk about those end of life things with any priest, but for St. Martin's, I take care of helping make those plans. We keep them in our file. It's good also to let your loved ones know that you've made those plans. Things that you need to think about when you do that. You need to think about the people you want to participate. Maybe people to read or be pallbearers, and this will depend on your faith tradition too. That there will be different levels of people participating. Eulogists maybe. Will there be a casket or an urn with ashes at the funeral? Will they not be present? These are things to discuss with your faith leader and your faith community. What your choices might be for scripture readings, for music, and make that appointment and talk those things over with your spiritual leader, your faith community. And then the other side of that is planning with a funeral home or direct cremation. Now, those are the folks that you will talk to about taking care of your earthly remains when you die. In our tradition anyway, that's not the church. That's a funeral home or that's a cremation business. What will the disposition be of your earthly remains? If you're to be buried, where will that burial be? What cemetery? And do you have a preference on the type of casket or the type of burial? If it's cremation, what will the disposition of those ashes be? Will they be stored in an urn on someone's shelf? Will they be interred at your church or or a cemetery? Will they be scattered in a special place, at sea or in the mountains or on the 9th hole of the golf course? I don't know. Don't do that though. And then the important thing is to discuss these things with your family or your loved ones and make sure that they know what your wishes are. Just a side story, I had an uncle who passed away, and he and my aunt had talked about all of these things, and he had left, they had I think it's called 5 Wishes. It's a little book that helps you work through a lot of these things. And he had written at some point that he wanted his ashes to be scattered in the mountains in a specific state. And so then when we were talking about it, I said, well, it would have been nice if he would have been a little more specific. There's a lot of, that's a big state with a lot of mountains. And then we talked about it though, and decided it really was okay, because then we got to choose where in the mountains when we decided to go do that, where we would go. And we didn't have to try to make it to an exact specific spot. But the important part was that they had the conversation and that he had left some kind of instructions so that she knew exactly, what his wishes were. So then I want to talk a little bit about the two, funeral home or direct cremation, because that's not always clear. For at the time of death, a funeral home can be very helpful. They can help with things like burial or cremation. They usually have a prepay option if that's something that you want to do. Depending on the funeral home, they've got a wide range of services that they will offer. They can do everything from help with publishing an obituary, to obtaining death certificates, hold a visitation, coordinate with a cemetery. Some funeral homes are associated with a cemetery, some are not. So those are the things a funeral home can do. Direct cremation places, they provide cremation services. They don't have those helpful things with helping with write an obituary, helping with publishing that, helping with death certificates. You might not want or need that help. So the direct cremation might appeal to you. They'll usually give the cost, just list it right on their website, exactly what the cost will be. With a funeral home, you'll talk to them and they'll go through and talk about what their different options are and let you know that. Whatever you decide, if you decide on the direct cremation, gather that information, talk to your loved ones about it, and then have that contact information in those important documents that you will let your loved ones know about. Okay, we can go to slide number 6. So, immediate concerns at the time of death. Loved ones have a lot of decisions to make, and when grief affects your ability to be able to make decisions, if you've planned well, then this part will be much easier for your surviving loved ones. If your loved ones have planned well, this part will be easier for you when you are the surviving loved one. Like I said, those family loved ones there's just lots of decisions to be made. And if you've made all these plans and let them know, then it's just so much easier. The first thing that happens after a death is you have to call the funeral home or the direct cremation service, and they will take into their care the earthly remains of the person. You need to notify your faith community, call your church, your synagogue, let them know that there has been a death in your family. Locate those documents that you have listed, and you have in that safe place, and notify your legal advisor, your financial advisor, and all of these planning steps that we've talked about, where you've made these plans and you've gathered this information and you have it someplace, makes all of that. It's never easy, no matter how long you have to plan or anticipate a loved one's death, or you kind of know when it's, if you know it's approaching, that doesn't make the actual event any easier. And there is still grief, and absolutely every person experiences grief in their own individual way. But one of the common things with most people is it just affects your ability to think clearly and to make decisions. So then let's go to the next slide. The planning. I'm just going to talk from the perspective of my experience in planning services at St. Martin's. And so each faith community will have their own sort of way of pre-planning or of planning services. And some of these things will apply, I think, universally. When you meet with your spiritual advisor, your faith community, to pre-plan, there's questions that you will want to ask. And those questions, of course, will depend on your particular community. And there might be different questions that you have to consider depending on that. Here are the things that I discuss with folks at St. Martin's. We talk about setting the date and the time of the service, and we always encourage people to check with the church first before setting any kind of a date or time, because you might go to a funeral home and they might say, oh, we have this date and this time at the cemetery. And then you come to the church and find out that the whole church is closed that day because of, construction or maintenance or something. So it's really always important to not finalize anything with a funeral home or a cemetery until you've checked in with your faith community. Here we talk about the location. We've got different locations. Like we have a chapel, we have the church, we have a parish life center. So we talk about what location do you want? What type of service will this be? Will it be a funeral? Will it be a memorial service? In our tradition, a funeral means that you have a casket or you have an urn with ashes that's present at the service. When we say memorial service, then we're talking about a service where no ashes, no casket are present. Okay.
What about just graveside service?
Yes, that's possible too. And that's something to think about. When you're pre-planning, especially if you say, I just only want a graveside service, I don't want a service in the church. That is a possibility and an option that people opt for sometimes. And it kind of depends on, if you think there's going to be 100 people there, then a graveside service is probably not a good idea. If it, 10, 20, 30, that's fine for graveside. Yeah. Yeah. Where, interment, we have the Garden of the Holy Cross, columbarium at St. Martin's. Other faith communities have, similar columbariums, depending on the congregation. And so are you looking at a cemetery? So those, just where will the interment be? Thinking about scripture choices. In the Episcopal Church, we have the Book of Common Prayer suggests appropriate scripture choices, and we usually start with those. But we're also willing to talk about other scripture choices, and that'll just depend on the church or the faith community. Music, we have at St. Martin's, we have an organist who will always be present for a funeral. We also we have vocalists. We always suggest a soloist because that helps with the music. Different faith communities are going to have different options and different ideas on music, but that is something to ask about and to consider. And then flowers, there's different Episcopal churches have different policies on flowers and what's used and what's not used. And so it's just important to ask about that during the planning. Sylvia, did you have a question?
Does the chapel have, what kind of music does it have?
The organ.
They have an organ also?
There's
They
a
have
pipe
piano?
organ. No, there's no piano in our chapel. But there is in the big church.
There is a piano in the big church?
Yeah,
But can you request a piano?
you can.
Just curious.
Yeah. So, okay, last slide. Just in conclusion, basically planning for your own death, making all those preparations, planning your own funeral service, planning for your own burial or interment, whatever your disposition is, those are the greatest gift that you can give to your family, because it is so hard when you're grieving and you're trying to make decisions and choices. It really helps. I can speak from personal experience that when my dad passed away, he was in poor health, but I didn't expect him to pass away. But he had done most of these planning things, and it made it so much easier for us just to open the box and pull out the papers and call the church and say, I believe you already have on file what he wanted for his service. And they said yes. And it was, it would have been a lot harder if he had not made all of these kind of plans. Now we'll open it up for questions. Any other questions, Maggie?
I have a question. Comes from being married to a lawyer, I guess. But I understand if you die in a hospital, an autopsy is not required. But if you die at home, is an autopsy required? Is that something that direct cremation or the funeral home would know? Or
It depends on the circumstances, is what I know. If you die at home and there's not a doctor there, like you're not in hospice care, you do have to call the police, and you have to call the coroner. Has to come and actually verify the death, which that's always hard, because it's like, you don't want to, somebody has just lost their loved one, but
you would do that before you contacted the funeral home?
yes, because the funeral, it's okay to contact the funeral home, and they will say, you have to also call the police before we can come and take these remains into our care. You'll have to call the police, and they'll bring the coroner, and because a doctor, has to pronounce the person dead to be able to do a death certificate, which you need for everything you're going to do after a person dies, with your bank accounts, with everything that their name is on any kind of legal documents. You'll have to have that certified death certificate. So even as unpleasant as it sounds, if a person is in a hospital, they're under a doctor's care. And so the doctor pronounces, the coroner doesn't have to be involved. If a person is in hospice care, then the hospice folks take care of that. And then it really depends on each individual situation of whether an autopsy is required. It's not always required.
But
I know that.
Start in the order of who you notify and what
Right. Right. So yeah, calling the funeral home is okay to call first, and then they'll say, we're on our way and we can't do anything until the police have come.
There's kind of like a stop.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
they have to exclude any suspicious
Yeah.
circumstances.
And-
That's
yeah.
what it boils down to.
Yeah, and if they come and the person has died, of whatever, heart attack, now some kind of natural causes, the coroner will come and say, yes, this is what happened, and then everything else goes into motion after that. Any other questions?
Yes, I'd like to know, in the event that somebody would decide to donate their body to medical sciences, what would happen in that case? I mean,
Yeah.
I understand they come and pick up the
Mhm.
body and
Yeah.
take it to,
Yeah, well, that depends on the situation. I do know in some cases that when a person, some that we've experienced here, when someone has donated their body to science, then, they're the medical facility or medical school, then they take the earthly remains into their care, and then they do all the, the science stuff. But when they're complete, then many times the ones that we've experienced, then the person is cremated, and then the ashes are sent
I see.
back to the family.
Oh.
And it can take between 1 and 2 years
Yeah,
for that
that's
to
right.
happen.
They want to
Yeah,
get the benefit of the body,
right, right. And there might be other ways that works, but that's it, just the one that I've experienced. Yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other?
I have my questions. Circle, where on you always have questions. Well, one of them was about donating your body, because I have, and the only thing I know about they're supposed to call a certain number. I carry the card with me all the time.
Yes, and that's part of those important things to
Yeah.
make sure your loved ones
I
know.
carry it in my wallet because
Mhm.
I've
Yep.
accidents.
Carry it with your medical card and, yeah.
I have the other stuff at home, but they won't take, the body if they've had a communicable disease. And I think they won't take it if you've been in a really bad traumatic accident, which
Yeah,
obliterated the body.
lots of circumstances, yeah.
But you're right about everything else, so it takes
Yeah.
a year to 2 years, and then I remember asking my daughter if she, wanted the ashes. I didn't care, I mean.
And that's just something to talk to your family about, yeah.
And she said, "Oh, of course we want the ashes." All right, you get them.
We got plenty of time. Has this been helpful? Is it, okay,
Well, I went to the funeral home and followed through with, planning my cremation
mhm,
and paying them. And so I've got this card of this number that needs to be called if
Mhm.
something, when death happens.
mhm.
But I guess first I would call the church, and then I would call that my kids,
Other way around, call them first.
call them first.
Yeah, the funeral home that you've planned, call them first,
Right.
and then your family and the church,
Right,
in
exactly.
there, so.
And as I understand, they take the body and cremate it,
Mhm.
and then somebody in the family or whatever has to go pick up the cremation and bring it to the
Right,
church and put
yes.
it out front here.
And it depends on the funeral home. Some of them will let us take delivery will actually deliver the ashes after cremation, or the funeral home will bring them to us.
Yeah.
So,
Well, as I-
and some of them, the
somebody-
family needs to go pick them up. It just depends on,
Somebody in the family had to go pick up.
yeah,
the
so, okay,
cremation.
yeah.
That reminds me of something though. My brother died and he was a veteran.
Mhm.
And he wanted to be cremated and he wanted his ashes spread along with his dogs,
Mhm.
5 dogs or something, wanted to mix them. Haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years. But anyway, what I was, where am I going with it? The people who did the cremation were very reasonable, and they also contacted the Veterans Administration, and we had a veterans, besides the church service, we had the veterans service at the
National Cemetery, the one here in Houston.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's, we can do that too. We've had people here who are veterans who have died, and we have the memorial service in the church, and we had the burial at the Veterans Cemetery. And one of us will go and do the graveside at the Veterans Cemetery.
I heard
If
a
you
lot.
want us to, yeah.
One thing we probably all should do is on any important internet accounts that you have, or even like social media, have a list of the passwords so that your family can.
Yes, that's a
see all
good-
the accounts.
Yes, that's a good point. That's something to add to that important documents list is virtual accounts and
Yeah, cell
passwords.
phone passwords, any of that stuff, if it's anything that they would need the information or need to delete the information.
Yes,
It's-
that's a very good
it'll be a
point.
lot quicker.
Goodness, that's the problem nowadays. Passwords. I don't even want to set up it.
And my sister has a little red book
Everything
that she
requires
goes,
password.
when I pass, just grab the book, everything's in it.
That's good. That's good. So
I know, but I
you
need.
said a notebook or a box or have, all of your important information, having it all in one spot. Yeah. And then make sure that your loved ones know that's where they should look.
Yeah,
So-
and my doctor at one time told me that I should have like a red folder on my desk, that if anything happened,
Mhm.
paramedics, whatever, they see a red folder, they're gonna grab it and open it, and if it has.
That's
like, your
interesting.
director Of attorney, medical care.
Yeah,
Yeah,
advanced medical, DNRs, those kind of
Yeah,
things.
all that stuff, but yeah, but they said, cause you know, they're not gonna go rifling through your desk, but if they see a red folder on top, they'll.
Interesting. Okay, that's good info.
What else are we supposed to do? You know,
Yeah.
Planning for the
Recommendations.
Well,
And-
I think that's an excellent question, because what you're planning for ideally is a good death.
Right.
And so what we teach in our Aging with Grace series and beyond is, of course, to collect all of these various documents that Reverend has mentioned and more. With the example of an out of hospital do not resuscitate order, we'll suggest, especially if you are anticipating that you or your loved one is reaching the end of life, not to necessarily put it in a folder, but rather to tack it above your bed, so that ultimately, should human nature take over and emergency services be contacted, they are under no legal obligation, because they are aware of that document. They note it and note that the document has been properly signed by all the various individuals, witnesses, medical professionals that need to sign it, that they don't have to go through life-saving measures. But again, human nature being what it is, what do you do when you are anxious? You contact first responders.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a way of making sure that a person's wishes are still honored, even if you have gone ahead and said, "Oh God, I don't know what to do. I need someone else here helping me."
Yeah. Good point. Any other questions? We're in the final questions part, Peggy.
They were a little bit late starting over there, waiting for a quorum.
We had mentioned that
Yes.
it could take some time.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So,
I'm wondering also, you know, the suggestion to notify your legal advisor. Well, what if one doesn't have a legal advisor? I'm not that fancy to have a legal advisor.
Yeah.
Have a
then
lawyer
your loved
call it.
ones, yeah, just make sure your loved ones know what all your wishes are. And if you have a legal advisor, then that's one of the calls.
We actually have a list of things that you should probably keep, but I call it in a 3-ring binder or a file folder or something. I know my dad had done that and was very helpful for us.
it's a really long list.
Yeah.
And it includes some of the things that were rightly mentioned here today, such as, given the age in which we live, every online account, being able to access those accounts, either in order to, with, proper authority, to transfer assets from that account to the appropriate beneficiaries, or in the case of such things as social media and other types of subscriptions and what have you, to be able to close those down or transfer the information, to another account, whatever is most appropriate for an individual. So yeah, that master list came out to, I don't know how many pages, single spaced. And we decided not to go with a binder because we figured we would scare people if we went ahead and created a binder about this thick, brought it into the room, thumped it down on the table and said, "Fill this and you'll be fine." It shouldn't be that scary, but there are, if you can get through, I would say 2/3 of what's in that list, you're doing better than most of the population in terms of preparation.
And for those online accounts that have passwords, just be mindful that that's something you're going to have to update, because we all know that, you try to go in and they say, "Oh, you have to update your password today." So when you update that password, you have to go back to your list and make that update. So.
All this technology is just making life more complicated. it was already, I mean, when my husband died, I was, 40 years old. I had no idea how these things would, work here and all that. Thank God I had my brother-in-law that, was, abused and all that. And, no, I have to say, I was thankful that I had, help, from some family members, because I would not have known what to do, what the right sequence of events were.
If you are ever in doubt, as you do preparations, all of the professionals on this campus, regardless of what institution they serve, will send you to one of us to go ahead and to help you make sure that the list is right for you. If you are talking about unexpected death, I think that Reverend Neilson's list is not only sufficient, but about all that you can expect to handle, given the trauma of that moment. And so I'm very grateful that you put it in such a concise fashion, because the trauma that you may be going through will only allow for certain amounts of input to stick. And so even the question of who gets contacted first, your faith community or the funeral home, being able to say, no, the funeral home needs to be contacted first is an important step, because odds are the decision making about when and where a funeral service will take place can wait until the next day. But getting that person out of the home, the hospital, wherever they happen to be, and into the secure arms of a funeral director, whatever the disposition for the body may be, that's your first step. Right alongside with, if there are because it's unexpected, understanding that a coroner may need to be involved in order to sign off and allow whatever you decide to memorialize to move forward.
Keep in mind, if your loved one's in the hospital or care facility, they'll let you stay for several hours, but that's the limit of their largesse, because they don't want the person staying in their room, particularly if they're in an ICU.
Especially with the hospital beds in short supply sometimes.
I remember they sent my brother, they said they were gonna send my brother to the mortuary. And I just had such a fit. I said, what do you mean? I mean, he had died, when we were in palliative care or whatever. But the mortuary is in the hospital.
The morgue,
And when I found that out, it made all the difference in the world. I thought.
But keep in mind, their morgues are small too.
Yeah.
When I was a chaplain at Memorial City Hospital, I think we had a 3-cubby morgue. So, I don't know what they did during the pandemic. I don't even, because by then I was serving here and not in the hospital, but
this is still pandemic.
It's not the big old room that they show on TV shows.
No, it's definitely not.
With 2 bodies.
Right, with the wall of cubbies.
I'm afraid it's far less sophisticated than that. Hospitals generally, community hospitals, I should say. I don't want to speak for specialty or flagship hospitals, but community hospitals generally will place a refrigerated locker in their basement. And that's where temporary storage will occur until a funeral director can arrive in order to go ahead and to escort the body to their refrigerated site until, depending on the family's wishes, whether preservatives will be used on the body or whether the body will remain refrigerated until burial. There are health and safety concerns that need to be taken into consideration, which none of us want to hear about more thinking about the soul that embodied that loved one, that we still recognize, even though the soul is now departed. So it almost forces you to be of two minds, the emotional self and the very pragmatic self, in terms of what is best for public health and dignity, while recognizing that you're hurting. So
Yeah. That's all the
Thank you,
questions.
Lisa.
Thank you all so much for coming today.
and thank you, and for all of you who are here today. So long as we have your contact information through registration, that certainly is the case for online folks as well. But in person or online, you will go ahead and get copies of today's recording, today's slides, and we certainly encourage you again. Remember, I said at the beginning, I'll repeat it at the end. As far as more information about our programs, all you need to do is go to our website, to hhci.org. You can click on the events tab to see what else we have going on through the remainder of the fall season. Typically, we will have on the third Thursdays of each month, with the exception of December, because the holidays do tend to change up our schedules a little bit. Our lunch and learn speakers, and you can see at least there are some of our fall series speakers, and others, of course, will populate as we move into the spring. And we certainly encourage you to go ahead and partake of anything, whether again it's live or you want to sign up in order to get the recording, get the slides to look at your leisure. We would love to have you. And by the way, you shattered the previous year's percentage attendance record. So congratulations.
Yay!
Because live attendance today was well over 50%.
Good.
Well over. And in fact, I think we were closer to 65% if I did my rough count pretty well. So high compliments. And
Thank
we
you.
are grateful for all of you to have come today.
Well,
Thank you so
very
much.
Thank you for your time.
And who's next month? ADRC?
Next month, I believe we have Morgan Zarengi, who is the manager of case management services, director of case management services, for the Alexander Jewish Family Service of Houston. And so case management is a different type of discipline as opposed to the counseling work that you will see from licensed social workers. And yet both are trained, and depending on which direction they take, to help you manage your daily or emergency affairs versus engaging you in some form of counseling through the lens of, say, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and so forth. So she's going to explain more about what they do specifically at Jewish Family Service, but by extension, just as Reverend Neilson did today, what you can expect to see out of case management services in different settings throughout our community. So again, we encourage you to go ahead and to register early and often.
I have a question here. Case management pertaining to what? To illness or mental illness or
Yes,
anything?
all of the above.
Okay.
Yes, because people will be coming into social service agencies with a variety of concerns. Some of them are going to be related to securing the type of clinical support they need for a medical condition, whether it is diagnosed as a physical malady or whether it's diagnosed as a mental health disorder. And you're going to have folks who have had a very rough ride due to disaster or loss of employment or what have you, and need to determine how to access the best or the widest array of financial resources that will keep their households afloat. And sometimes this is as simple as educating people as to the services that already exist in the community that they can directly access. And other times they're going to need assistance, say, the first time you apply for Medicaid, not Medicare, but Medicaid. It is a different type of process, as some of you are well aware, and some of you have not yet had the pleasure. And so these are where the people who are versed in the labyrinth that is social services will be there to guide you through the process. Have a wonderful remainder of the week and a kind and gentle weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.